Hey guys, it's Kingdom Orange 2 here, and welcome back to my channel. For today's video, I wanted to take a moment and talk about some things in the Monster High plot that never really made sense to me. Now, while Mattel's main focus for Monster High was obviously doll sales and not in making an Emmy-winning cartoon, I did feel as though what set Monster High apart from other doll lines and increased their sales was their dedication to storytelling and creating complex narratives with their characters. Now, obviously, I know this is a cartoon, so some things aren't going to make sense or just need to be overlooked. While rereading the diaries as well as rewatching the cartoons, I compiled a list of certain questions or topics that I wish Monster High would have done a better job at touching on. I do, however, want to let everyone know that this isn't meant to criticize or judge the creators of Monster High. They clearly have spent a lot of time and effort into fleshing out these characters and their backstories, and I hope that these things I decided to touch on aren't too nitpicky. So with that being said, let's get this video started and touch on the 6 things about Monster High that I just couldn't wrap my head around. First thing that never made sense to me about Monster High was their fiction about ghosts. In 2011, we were introduced to a ghost that attends Monster High called Spectra Vondergeist. She seems to be the new ghoul at school, and while claiming in her biography to be 16 years old in monster years, it is mentioned in the video game Ghoul Spirit that she was born in the 19th century. This implies that Spectra was once human but may have tragically passed at around 16 years old and thus doesn't physically age anymore. However, in the special Haunted, Spectra Vondergeist tells her friends that there is another secret world called the Ghost World, inhabited by many types of ghosts from phantoms, banshees, grim reapers, and poltergeists. She also attended a school located there called Haunted High, but her family decided to leave the Ghost World and settle in Monster High a couple of years ago. River Styx additionally tells the ghouls that ghosts don't haunt the Monster World anymore because one ghost, known as the Red Lady, was able to travel freely between the monster and ghost world by summoning a portal. After constantly terrorizing monsters, she was later punished with chains. Now, there are a couple of things to unpack here. First of all, River Styx is responsible for ferrying people from the monster to the ghost world, but according to Portergeist's diary, most ghosts in the ghost world have never seen a solid because hauntings are forbidden, and they are afraid that monsters will want to destroy all ghosts in their way of unlife. So if ghosts are afraid of monsters and monsters don't know about the ghost world because it's a secret, then who exactly is River Styx ferrying across? Wouldn't the best course of action be to try and limit transportation between the two worlds? And speaking of secrets, you were telling me that no ghost who currently lives in the monster world spilled the beans. Surely it could be something that only a few people know about, but I find it strange that someone as old as Draculaura has never heard about it. Also, why were Operetta and Scara dragged into this? I like how it was finally recognized that they are some sort of spirits, but Scara and Operetta never really mentioned the fact that they were ghosts until now, and there's really no explanation as to why they are solids in the monster world but aren't in the ghost world. Listen, I know that there are many different types of ghosts, from apparitions, specters, phantoms, poltergeists, revenants, etc., and that Monster High took the time to try and create a complex backstory and explanation for this, but I honestly wish they would have done something a little more straightforward or simple. Immortals, Mortals, and the Undead. When defining a character simply by their age at Monster High, I like to break them down into 3 different categories. The first are mortals, such as Claudine Wolf, Laguna Blue, and Torlai Stripe. These types of monsters age similar to humans and will eventually die due to aging, disease, or some unforeseen circumstance. The next type of monsters are the undead. Undead characters such as Cleo Denial, Frankie Stein, Rebecca Steam, and Ellie D do not physically age and aren't susceptible to disease. However, they could potentially die to an extraneous event such as a car crash or a hurricane. Finally, there are some monsters who are considered immortals. Take C.A. Cupid, for example. She will live forever and cannot physically or spiritually perish. Posey Reef could also be considered in this category because she is the daughter of a god and therefore probably immortal. Now, obviously there are going to be some outliers, but 3 species of monsters I just can't seem to figure out. The first are the ghosts. Originally, it was thought that ghosts were humans and therefore when they died they would physically stay the same age, but their spirit would live forever. However, with the introduction of the special Haunted, this idea is thrown out the window. If you look at each of the characters' bios, it says they are 14 to 17 years old, and since they look the same age physically as their stated ages, that would imply that ghosts do age. But if ghosts were immortal, why would they age? Well, I might have come up with an answer to this. Spectre Vondergeist does state in her biography that she is 16 years old in monster years. What exactly a monster year is uncertain. However, it is implied to be a very long time. If ghosts are immortal and they live for eternity, they may age very, very slowly and eventually stop at some point. This theory somewhat comes from Greek mythology, as many gods start off as babies and then grow up to physically resemble someone in their 20s or 30s but are still immortal. After the ghosts, we have the vampires. Since Draculaura's age is 1600 and she physically has the appearance of a 16-year-old, I assume that meant for every 100 years a vampire physically ages only 1 human year. So that would mean that Dracula, who has the physical appearance of a 40-year-old, would be about 4,000 years old. However, this theory completely goes into the toilet in the special Why Do Ghouls Fall in Love when Draculaura says that 400 years ago she met Valentine. Not only does she look physically to be the same exact age she is now, but it was also stated that they met in high school. I guess like ghosts, that it must age in a weird type of way. I also want to point out that since vampires age, they do blend this line between mortals and the undead. Lastly, we have the zombies. So typically in most fiction, zombies are reanimated corpses who like to eat brains. At Monster High, zombies are usually blue or green in color, walk very slowly, eat brains, and speak their own language through a mutter of moans and groans they call zombie. What I can't seem to figure out though, if zombies were born humans and died therefore ceasing to age, kind of like mummies, or are they born zombies but age really slowly like vampires do? Gulia Yelps does state to be 16 years old in monster years in her biography. While I don't think this implies that zombies are immortal like ghosts, it could mean that she was born around the same time as Spectra and therefore may not stay the same age like mummies do, but age significantly slower than vampires do. So therefore, like vampires, they would be a type of undead monster that age. And to add even more to this confusion, I do want to point out that there are some type of monsters who I wasn't even going to try and start to figure out how to explain. Genies like Gigi Grant, gargoyles like Rochelle and Garrett, dragons like Gina Firelong, and Honey Swamp Island monsters like Honey Swamp. I could not figure out what category they could go in or even a slight idea on how they would age. The Vampire Queen. So in the movie Fright's Camera Action, we learned that vampires are ruled over by a vampire queen, but the last one, Elizabeth, disappeared 400 years ago. In her place, her uncle, Lord Stoker, ruled over the vampires, but when pressured by the Vampire Council to find the queen's whereabouts again, Lord Stoker, using a fake vampire heart, tricks Draculaura into believing she is the next queen. However, when she figures out that the vampire heart is a fake, she realizes she isn't the next vampire queen and decides to go on a journey to find her. After following a bunch of clues, Draculaura is led to Hauntlywood, where she believes that the vampire heart was given to the actress Veronica Von Vamp, and she will know the whereabouts of Elizabeth. But in the end, Veronica Von Vamp reveals that she is Elizabeth, and that the vampire heart was located inside of Rebecca Steam all along. Now, I know I just gave you the entire plot summary to Fright's Camera Action, but this story doesn't really make sense. First of all, royalty usually works in a succession pattern. Typically, when someone dies, their offspring becomes the next king or queen. So I would assume if Elizabeth's father was the king of the vampires, after he mysteriously disappeared, then she would be the next in line. But since that is never stated in the movie, it seems to be that the vampire heart chooses a female vampire at random and that vampire becomes their ruler. So I guess the vampire heart just happened to choose Elizabeth, who was conveniently already part of the vampire court. But I feel like it would have made more sense to me if she was already royalty, or she had some sort of special character traits that made the vampire heart want to choose her. Also, a lot of people like to point out that they thought it was dumb that nobody could tell that Veronica Vamp was Elizabeth, but obviously nobody would have recognized her because not only did they not have photographs in the 1600s, but her overall appearance has changed. However, what I don't understand is nobody thought it was suspicious that this actress looked very similar to Elizabeth's portraits and even acted in movies about vampire royalty. What additionally didn't make sense to me is that vampires don't have reflections, so they can't be seen in photographs. But how does Elizabeth show up in movies? Mummies. So Cleo de Nile has this kind of long and confusing backstory that doesn't really make sense to me, but I wanted to save this discussion potentially for a future video and instead focus on mummies overall. Now we know the most popular mummy in the Monster High universe is the legendary Cleo de Nile, but she isn't just an ordinary mummy. She, along with her father and sister were Egyptian royalty who were buried alive with magical bandages before they were awoken thousands of years later. It is also noted that mummies in Monster High can't remove their bandages or they will turn to dust, and they need to constantly moisturize their skin for it to stay dry. What doesn't make sense, however, is what exactly are these magical bandages and how do they work? Now, many people in ancient Egypt were mummified, but it is not implied that every citizen of ancient Egypt is now living on Earth as a mummy. And we can't just say only royalty become mummies, because not only are Cleo and her family the only known royal mummies alive today, but we are also introduced to a mummy backgrounder, a teacher named Mr. Mummy, and Seth Ptolemy and his mother. I honestly feel, just like with Ghost, they could have come up with some easier explanation for why only certain people become mummies. Maybe it was only people who died from a certain plague or disease, a catastrophic event, just something easier and more straightforward. Monsters, minority or majority? So the question is, are monsters in the Monster High universe a minority or a majority of the population? It is never actually stated in the webisodes, but it is heavily implied that monsters are a minority in a human world. In the early book series called Monster High, monsters, also called RADs or regular attribute dodgers, live in a community located in Salem, Oregon. They disguise themselves as humans and attend a school called Marston High. This idea was later somewhat brought over into the cartoon canon in the movie Ghouls Rule, in which Monster High is located near a human school called New Salem High in the town of New Salem. However, in later specials such as Scare's City of Frights, as well as Frights Camera Action, it seems to be that humans are somewhat forgotten and they live in a monster world. While I could have overlooked this, it does raise a lot of questions as to what the purpose of Monster High is, and why monsters would want to enroll. Headmistress Bloodgood claims that Monster High is the only school that is open to all kinds of monsters regardless of species. While this message is intriguing, I don't think it's strong enough for monsters to want to enroll, especially when there are now thousands of high schools closer to them. And out of all of those schools, you're telling me it's the only high school that is made up of different monsters? There's also no indication that Monster High is some sort of prestigious school either, as it's not a boarding school and was even so broke in the Volume 5 webisodes that they had to cut their arts program. I do like how in Generation 2 it is firmly established that monsters are again a minority in a human world, and that most monsters went into hiding after the Great Monster Flight. But unfortunately, this storyline was not executed to be as interesting as I thought it could have been, and instead we were given boring and super childish plots. The reboot. So the last thing that I never understood about Monster High was the reboot. In 2016, due to declining sales, the Monster High line was rebooted. Not only were the dolls changed to be more cartoon friendly and childlike, the whole story was redone. Instead of Frankenstein being the new ghoul at Monster High, a school established 200 years prior, it was now a boarding school created by Draculaura, wanting a place for monsters to come together out of hiding. The reboot may have re-established the timeline, but here's what doesn't make sense about it. Usually with reboots, everything is started from scratch, but instead of doing that, Monster High sort of blended the fiction of its Generation 1 characters with their Generation 2 characters. Some characters, such as Frankie, Draculaura, Claudine, Laguna, and Cleo, were given new bios as well as new designs. Other characters kept their bios and were given new designs, such as Operetta, Rochelle, and Abby, or kept their bios as well as their designs like Twyla, Torelei, Deuce, and Venus. But this raises a lot of questions. For example, while not explicitly stated, Ari Hauntington is clearly a replacement for Spectra Vondergeist. In Dana Treasure Jones' bio, she states that her best friends are River Styx and Vendala Doubloons, characters from the special Haunted, whose main character was Spectra Vondergeist. While they could be retconning parts of the story, why are they picking and choosing weird little details to get rid of or confirm? Another example of this would be that in Welcome to Monster High, Claudine Wolf is now the only girl in her family with an unnamed and unspecified amount of younger brothers. However, in the doll line Monster Family, we were not only reintroduced to Howleen and Claude Wolf, but also two other little sisters, Paula and Meredith Wolf. And while I can understand why they may have decided to give her sister dolls last minute, why were they not introduced in the TV specials or even later in the webisodes? And while I wanted to dive into the 500 questions I have for the 2020 reboot in regards to bios, backstories, etc., it's still too early to try and figure it out. But one thing I can say for sure is that the new Monster High movie and cartoon will be set in a completely different universe and will feature new character designs. And hopefully, as time goes on, more of this will start to make sense. What I want to take away from this video today is that now Monster High has a third shot at being super successful again, so their main focus is going to have to be in telling the best story they can to draw in viewers and not just on high fashion dolls. Also, I want you guys to write in the comments down below your explanations, thoughts, or things that I might have missed. Who knows, maybe I'll make a second part in the future. If you liked this video today and want to see more content in the future, make sure you hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Thank you guys so much for watching today, and I will see you soon. Bye!